Hi, this is Chris from airwindows, and I have something special this week, or this update anyhow. I'm putting these things out more often than once a week. The last plugin I put out was TPDF-dither, and before that was BitShift Gain. And I'll be using BitShift Gain to demonstrate this new dither that I've got. It's not really mine to have, and I haven't got it, but here's what we got. This is some music. This is what TPDF-dither sounds like. TPDF-dither is made in this way where I'm going to try to breeze through this in case you've watched my previous videos. You've got these positions where the digital audio ends up, and flat dither is making noise bounce around between two bits, the smallest direction that you can go. And TPDF-dither is doing two of these. They can add up, and the probability density function means that occasionally it'll go all the way to 2 bits in height, and mostly it's going to be considerably less. It'll tend to average out to be a little less. The reason this matters is this causes a noise floor where if you've got this going on, it's covering this full range, but it is going to put out a sort of loud, dense, solid noise sound. Now I'm going to take a moment to introduce you to a friend of mine called Paul Frindle. Paul Frindle is the person that designed a lot of the algorithms for Sony Oxford. I think actually, I don't know whether he designed all the algorithms for Sony Oxford, but this is a very smart guy and I love him to bits. And when talking about dithers on Facebook one day, he explained that he had a special way of doing it. What he's doing is you take the first noise value, and then when you go on to the next sample, you take another noise value, but rather than just adding the two together, getting twice as big, what you do is you take this one and what he said was subtract it from the other noise sample. Now, when you try to do that in mathematics, nothing happens. It's possible that I'm not doing this the way that he meant, but I think I probably am because check this out. TPDF, PaulDither. He is taking each sample and then using it twice. First, regular, and then inverted. And that can also function as subtracting the previous sample from the current one. That also means you only have to generate one random noise value, a sample. So it's still TPDF, but it does half the processing of coming up with random numbers. And it's what's called a one-pole high pass, meaning that every noise that you got, if you weight a sample that's being subtracted from itself, and that's similar to what I'm doing in the slew plugin that I released a long time ago. The result is like this. Having explained it as well as I could, let's just listen to it. I'm sold that this is a neat invention, and I think he's a very clever guy to have come up with it. Firstly, we'll get Alien Kittens going. Bear in mind that if neither of these dithers are engaged, I'm not truncating, so the bit shift will go down 16 bits, then back up, and it's really not going to sound any different. Bit shift gain doesn't change the tone at all. So we got this. Now let's hear TPDF. And you can sort of hear the sounds in here. It's not really obscuring things all that terribly much. Now let's switch over to PaulDither. This is great. Now what you'll notice is in practice, this is a lot fatter and thicker. This goes up to exactly the same peak values, because if the two numbers correlate just right, it will still go up to 2 bits in size. But since it's got that one pole high pass filter going on, it's much thinner, it's much lighter. There's a bassiness in this that you don't get here. There's also a smoothness to this that you don't quite get here. It's just a little bit spittier and there's a little more texture there, which is going to become relevant when I start explaining the high gloss dither that I did. But you'll hear when we play this that the TPDF dither does literally nothing to alter the way we focus on sounds. PaulDither is a little bit different than that. Because it's got energy up in the high frequencies, it balances stuff a little bit different, and it's a more open in certain places so that our attention is drawn differently. It's like it's taking the quietest details of the sound and shifting the way our attention lands so that our perception of the music is different, like so. Yeah. It's pretty steady. Then, PaulDither, it's like this. Notice the cymbals and hi-hats and things. The way we hear the music alters a little bit. And again, we'll play this a little bit again and then bounce back to TPDF. See, the snare feels darker and sort of more organic, maybe a little bit less hyped on the regular TPDF dither because it's not altering the feel of it. And PaulDither is obscuring some things, which has the effect of revealing others. This is where all boutique dithers get interesting, because what you conceal, you also reveal elsewhere. The information, there's a fixed amount of information in there. We're just rearranging it. So what we get here is tone doesn't really change there. And then Paul's high pass dither, which does exactly the same job of covering the triangular probability density function. It does the same thing of letting the volumes fade down into the noise floor seamlessly. But just by having energy in a frequency range and not in other frequency ranges, it shifts the balance of everything. It shifts the balance of the very small amount of information that we're storing here, and it shifts the balance of how we hear what's buried in the track. So here's the final upshot on PaulDither versus TPDF-dither. And bear in mind, what Paul wrote on Facebook is not this. This is just my implementation of a single pole high pass with two noise sources using a previous sample's worth of noise source. That's what Paul said, but it's not how he said it. So this, for all I know, could be Chris Dither, but I'm going to call it PaulDither because I'm pretty sure this is what he meant, even if it wasn't exactly what he said. And I would say, feel free to use this in replacement of TPDF-dither because it's going to be every bit as good at doing what TPDF-dither does. Bear in mind when doing so that this is a bit of a tweak. This is a Paul Frindle tweak on retaining all of the technical performance of real TPDF, because it is real TPDF, but doing a thing with it that changes how we hear the audio. And that's probably not the end of the story, because I've thought of a fun thing to do with this concept too, and I'll be following up with that. But for the time being, bottom line here is go ahead and try this out, see if you like it better. Know that it is not technically perfect as far as having no changes to tonal balance or whatever. It's going to reveal different things down around the noise floor, things that you might like a whole bunch. You know, for all I know, he's used this all in the Sony Oxford stuff. So if you want to sound like Sony Oxford, you'd better be using this rather than TPDF, or rather than ordinary TPDF, because again, this is TPDF just as much as standard, boring old TPDF. I hope you like this, and thank you very much, Paul, for talking about this publicly. And I guess if you want me to not make it, firstly, you shouldn't have talked about it on Facebook. But I don't see this guy as causing a problem with that. I mean, I'm less concerned about running into terrible trouble with Paul coming down on me like a ton of bricks, and I'm more concerned with just Paul should be living at least as comfortably as me with my rousing $400 a month off of a Patreon. So I would say look up Paul Frindle, check out his frequency modulation. I'm going to put an annotation, I swear, about Paul's DSM. I'm pretty sure that's what it is a DSM. I can't afford it, never been able to, but nor can I afford Sony Oxford desks. But Paul's designed all of this stuff. He's a great guy and is living in the UK and getting by in their strange little society. I shouldn't say strange little society because in America we have just said, hold my beer, and topped that. But Paul is worth keeping track of, and if you can buy his plugins and things like that, especially plugins that support him directly, then you should totally do so. But since he's seen fit to share the basic concept of that you can have a TPDF-dither that is a one-pole filter at the same time, I put one together, and I hope you like it. And if he would like to use it, he is more than welcome to grab my stuff and use it in anything he wants to do. Probably has his own little plugins just like this for doing exactly this. Thank you, Paul Frindle, and I hope you folks like this little plugin.